being able to exist in that space of ambiguity and challenging ideas, I think, is very, very important to being a technomancer. Even outside, like, if we're gonna like use it, coin a term, technomancer, then yeah, like it's being able to navigate ambiguity, being willing to go into the darkness of space and find something new.
The old world is ending,
and we have the opportunity to rethink everything.
This is a show about the systemic problems in our world
and the real solutions we have today
to transition from an apocalyptic storm of war, scarcity, and ecological collapse
to create an abundantly advanced, collaborative society
that sustains all life.
You may think it's an impossible dream,
but the alternative is an inevitable nightmare.
We're your hosts, Matt Holton,
Amanda Smith,
and Zachary Marlowe.
And together,
we can move past this economic absurdity
and come together to actualize our collective potential
to create something completely new.
We are
Moneyless Society.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another kind of internal MoSo podcast episode. I'm Ev. I'm part of the Media and Messaging Circle. You may have seen that we've done this before with our General Circle members. We're basically trying to start to introduce all of our, friends, comrades, audience, whatever, to like the actual structure of Moneyless Society and what it is that we're building, how we're building it, so that people can like understand, get involved, do something similar. And we're kind of going in order, introducing you to each of the circles. And for today, for Technomancy, we have two of our technological wizards here. You remember Lavra from last time, who's also part of the General Circle. Jade is as well. We just can't cram 90 people into each meeting. So, we're taking just a couple members at a time to join us on the show and kind of explain, our structure. So, Lavra, I know we met you last time, so if you haven't seen that introduction, go back and watch that General Circle episode. But let's meet Jade. Jade, how did you get involved in Technomancy? How did you get involved in MoSo? How'd you get here?
Lavra, 100%. So way back when, I had like similar ideas to a lot of the things that we were doing at MoSo already. And I was like reaching out. I believe I had originally been a Patreon subscriber for the YouTube channel, and I reached out to them on Twitter over Patreon, and they eventually got back to me, and they were like, you might be really interested in MAGNOVA, which I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to talk about.
And Lavra, I hope that are you okay with that kind of intro that it was in the last episode, or do you? Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to rehash anything.
Yeah, I'll just say hi. I'm Lavra to Mutis. That's how you say my name, and I am they them. I am indeed interested in making MAGNOVA happen. That's been a meta process for a long time, where I've been like just trying to network, and I can't make it all happen because there's too many things that need to happen for a large platform to take off. So I've been focused for the last few years on just really building up that foundation, building up that network of people who have the complementary skill sets, and then also like a home for it. So, it's been ups and downs, or like, an ebb and flow to that. But gradually, the people are starting to align, and the action is also starting to align.
To explain, a little bit more about the circle, I think we mentioned in the last episode that Moneyless Society is a sociocratic structure organization. So essentially, it's an organization of circles that have autonomy to accomplish different goals within the organization that help us accomplish our goals overall. And in those circles, you have technomancy, you have admin, you have media and messaging, you have people, and you have direct action. So technomancy started out as technology, but it became technomancy. Can you explain that term a little bit, Lavra? What is that in your mind?
Yeah, I'd be happy. So when people hear technology, they have a certain set of concerns that they think that's going to cover. So they view it as a sort of like a staple part of business as usual. So there is just some set of tools that you're expected to use in a business and a nonprofit. And our goal is less that, we serve that function. We do a lot of the internal IT, but our focus, our mission as a circle is is to really expand on what that can be, and to use technology to really form new things and new structures, new patterns of working together. So we're always at the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, really. Everything is going on, learning about the different tools that are coming out, learning how they might work together, how we might use them, and thinking, what do we need to invent still? What hasn't been made that needs to exist? So that's how I see technomancy. I like the idea that technology is magic, for a lot of people, because magic is just a system that you don't understand. It's mystical. It's beyond comprehension. So there's this inherent divide. There is a lot of magic in the world when you see it like that. It's not necessarily high fantasy, but there's no reason it couldn't be. People have ideas in their imagination about what the world could be like, and technomancy is really, in my mind, making magic,
Man,
making it so that there is magic.
that's such a good explanation. I remember seeing, I think it was on Tumblr, of course, one time that like when you think about like what like LCD screens are and stuff, like liquid crystal display, it's lightning and water and glass. Like it is magic, So that's such a cool way of looking at that. And I agree that it definitely does elevate it above just like, what computers are we going to use? It's like, how do we create new ways to exist in the world? And Jade, I know that you both of you, when I talk to you, your language is tech. Like that is how you understand the world. So for you, Jade, like what has technomancy kind of meant for you, and what have you been seeing in the conversations in that circle so far?
I think technomancy, to me, alongside everything that Lavra said, there's very much a magical element to it. But to me, it's also kind of in pairing it with the philosophy and ideology of Moneyless Society, is about allowing technology to be more horizontally accessible and to make it easier to use technology for everybody, and to make it so that just because somebody's setting up a tech solution for you, they don't have power over you. They don't have essentially a say or control over your process or the way that you want to do things. You get to make the magic happen. We're just kind of providing a source. We're trying to create outlets for that creativity and those ideas. And we don't want to be the people who are controlling your systems. It's too much of a burden. Lavra especially gets burnt out like super all the time, just with the many requests and the many things that we have to do to be able to keep things going and to try to improve things continuously. But what we really want to be focused on is kind of creating these platforms, building these tools that kind of make that, flexible enough while still being simple enough to be something that anybody can be part of setting up. Like the configuration shouldn't be just left up to us. It should be something that's naturally kind of set up for you based on how you use it. We kind of want to make, instead of like a, Full Metal Alchemist version of alchemy, we want to kind of make it a more intuitive, magic of you wave your wand and all of a sudden Wingardium Leviosa, sorry for the reference, but it kind of lifts you up and lifts up your computer off the ground, makes it a bit more about that wonder and mysticism instead of the deep, dark, kind of like blood and gore magic that I feel that technology and IT companies currently embody, where it's more about how do we surveil the people that are working for us? How do we kind of use technology to impose our views and opinions into people's systems and ideas, which I think we can try to avoid with the methods and philosophies that we're building at Moneyless Society.
The Fullmetal Alchemist reference is so great because that's based on, like, it is exactly based on the idea of equivalent exchange, which, okay, yeah, sure, you can't actually destroy matter. You'll get energy, right? So there is like an element of that in nature. There is that dimension, but they definitely explore in that anime the idea that, like, you can't create, you can only change. And there's that way of looking at it, but this is scarcity thinking, right? This is the capitalist mindset, the trade-based mindset, that the only way that value can flow is through equivalent exchange. And this is such an unquestioned assumption of human economics, like at this day and age, that is just so broken. Moneyless Society's whole ethos is the idea that like there are non-zero sum games that you can play. You can expand your view of the system to say like, well, yes, like in this system, like in a physical sense, in this system, there is a specific amount of energy or resources. But when you expand that idea, you expand your system, you can actually have much more radical transformations where value is created. There is something that emerges out of the arrangement of parts. That's not just the sum of those parts. So, like Harry Potter, there is this like element of, whoa, like I didn't pay for that. I didn't pay the wand to make that thing rise off the ground. It just happened. And maybe there is some like underlying energetic force at play. They explore that in Conquer Shambhala, which was, controversial. But, we don't have to be fueled by blood, right? And there, that I think is our thing. We don't have to be fueled by exploitation. Collaboration is more powerful. And I just love to see when media actually explores the idea that, like, by joining together and like assembling different parts, you get something new. You're not just like adding two things together.
Yeah, that's so funny to think of, like, the way that technology is being used right now as being like the dark magic, the dark side, the evil, all those things. And before we started the show, we actually were having a conversation about open source technology and how it's actually harder to create things that do things like capture all your data and all that. And I wonder if you want to kind of expand on that a little bit for the audience, Jade, what you were saying about how, like, your goal is to make technology accessible and have that be something that people can utilize to improve their lives. But that's so different than what we see now. And what we see now is actually harder to be evil, like with technology.
Yeah, I mean, too much of a lot of the overhead of one of the major applications that we use on a daily basis, whether it be Facebook, Google, or Microsoft products, is the fact that so much effort and time goes into creating data points and figuring out ways to collect those data points for analytics. And usually they pretend like it's to improve the product, but most of the times it's so that they can use that data and sell it in and of itself as a product. And that's a really difficult technical challenge. It's a very difficult problem, and usually it influences what product decisions are made, how they're made, and when they're going to be delivered. It kind of makes it so that, within these tech organizations, you have the brightest of minds, the freshest of graduates, the people who have the most passion for this technology and the most passion for programming and who've done the most work to learn. But they're kind of stuck behind a locked door where they're going to work on products that never see the light of day. 90% of everything that's worked on in these institutions gets locked up and never shared with anyone. People's decades of people's lives, individuals, and then hundreds of years, if you're trying to add them up all together, of innovation that is just lost because of a business decision not to do something. And it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. It's something that we could be using those minds and those people to not using them. We could be enabling them to be part of an ecosystem that really actually helps improve the world. We can have them be part of the change and part of the solution instead of just being a tool to really just facilitate, personal goals for a handful of investors. And it's unfortunately a thing where, there's always these mind games that are played within these environments about, like, how do we capture an audience? How do we capture a sector of a technology? How do we capture this? And a lot of the times, like Threads basically came out conveniently enough when Twitter was bought by Elon Musk and it was in an unstable state, which in my mind means that this was already in development for a very, very long time. They were just waiting for the right moment to review it, to deploy it. And it was it's just the case that they didn't deploy it because they didn't want to be competitors. When they saw the opportunity that they could push out a competitor out of an ecosystem, they went ahead and did it. And this is something that's common with many technologies. Google had artificial intelligence technology long before OpenAPI and ChatGPT were the thing, but they didn't release it and make it accessible to the public because admittedly, some of the technologies were not as mature, but at the same time, there was kind of like this system of like, if we give this out there, other people are going to start using it, and then we're going to have competitors. So it's unfortunate that a lot of these tools and these developments are constantly being, kept back from really making the impact that they can possibly make on the communities that they're a part of. And it's not like these companies are inherently bad. Google's mission statement is to make all of the, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's to make the universe's knowledge accessible at a person's fingertips. And that's a beautiful idea. That's a beautiful goal. And that's a beautiful concept. And I think the ethos of many of these companies, at least the way that they present it, isn't something that's inherently evil, but it's the packages that they come in. It's the frameworks that were set up in the economy that make it so difficult to really be able to continuously deliver on that mission. It's unfortunate, and now we end up in this situation where we have these massive tech monopolies that are presenting one face to the community and one face that is ideal, that we do want, presenting things that we do need and making things that we do believe in. But then on the other hand, we just there's a lot of stuff that they do hide from us, and they are trained to keep away from us, as far as like Google advertising data, for example. And it's unfortunate because these are really good and powerful platforms that do help a lot of people get the things that they want done. There's nothing wrong with wanting to use a cloud solution, with wanting to use a particular product set or framework or tool, but it does end up being grating and causing a lot of friction. Like most of the times, like the friction that is caused within these massive organizations is not because of the technologies they're using or the talent that they have or the people that are part of them, but because of what they need to do to continue operating at the financial level that they do. There are too many money concerns around the things that they're trying to do. Money is the core of their main issue, at least when it comes to their ethics.
Yeah, there's a lot of like awesome points you brought up, Jade, that I would love to dig in. I'm gonna forget most of them, I'm sure, but like to frame like or to draw a bridge between what you're bringing up in like the tech sector and the ecosystem in general, like outside in the world. That is something that we see as a problem, and that is one of like those grading dissonances between like what people want out of technology and what it does, because the people who create the technology are not the people. It's the businesses. It's the business drive, that force beyond any individual human, the motive, the requirement to prioritize profit. Like there is this legal obligation that companies have to sacrifice the intelligence and the creativity of the workers for whatever makes money. And like that realization is really at the core of what we're doing. So at Technomancy Circle, like we aren't necessarily building things every day, but what we do is we have a lot of conversations about like how we want things to look. What is it in our nature that is being just denied, that is being overwritten by the laws of this economy? Like what are the stipulations like that you have to abide by for like all of these normal profits seeking inventions and websites and software that we don't believe in? Like what do we need to reject? Like where do we need to be iconoclasts? And so this is something that I face like in every single development discussion, because I am really neurodivergent. I am on the spectrum, and in a way that I just it makes me like physically upset when I am told like, we need to do things this way because this is how things are done. And that like logic is so crucial to running a successful business, and that is what makes me mad, because like the way that things are done is toxic. It's very toxic to ourselves as individuals and like the future. It shapes the development of future technology, and we just continue the trend. But continuing the trend is what makes you money, because people want what they expect. People want what they've already done. And that like just brain dead status of like the entire population is something that I think we're trying to inject a little life into. We're trying to say like, no, we don't need to do things that way. And so this is like obviously a huge dissonance, right? This is a huge conflict of I don't know the interest, but like a conflict between different drives where, we want to be successful. Like we want people to use what we make, sure. And that requires some degree of assimilation of conformity. But on the other hand, like I think we recognize, and maybe this hasn't been like fully, stayed and fully realized among us, but like there is this need to just at that simple level say, no, we don't need to do things the way they've already been done. We can do things a different way. And so like when we think about like our taiga, for instance, we're thinking like, okay, well, yes, Scrum works this way, right? In if you go into the tech sector and you look at any company, they're always doing Agile, they're doing Scrum, there's sprints, epics, all that stuff is standardized, which makes it relatively easy to jump in and get going. But we also notice like, well, we're all volunteers, right? That doesn't necessarily work for us. There are some ways that we need to adapt it. So when we look at the taiga and think like, how do we shape this in a way that's conducive to the way that Moneyless Society works? Like, how do we shape this for our volunteers and like their needs? So there's this very like vague and like meta abstract thinking that we're doing all the time, which makes us slow, but also makes us sustainable and gradual, where we're thinking like, okay, what are the qualities of the technology that we want to have, and how do we engineer it to have those qualities? And that engineering requires divergence from the norm. It requires non-conformity. So there's just like this overwhelming pressure constantly that we're always fighting. So when you say it's easier to not be evil, like that's somewhat true. Like there are some technical things that are hard to do that are evil, right? That like we're forced to do. The difficulty, which has to be recognized, is in choosing not to do that. So it might be like we're all like being forced to do this really hard work. That doesn't mean it's harder like carte blanche, but like it is harder in that way, like for the daily lifestyle of a tech person. But what's hard and what we're trying to be a lighthouse for is like actually deciding against the flow. Let's go in a different direction, and actually look ahead at the future that we're making with this tech that we build, as opposed to just like, well, this will make us more money.
It's funny that, tech is and has been for decades, for probably generations, such a profitable just sector of industry. It is, it is, something that I think because it like makes so many things possible, and well, it's incredibly marketable. It's something that seems to be ever expanding. It becomes that definition of Silicon Valley. Like it's just about profit, right? Whereas so many like amazing things that we use every day come out of that. So many advancements that like are just mind-blowing, unbelievable come out of that. But like you were saying about success, like the definition of success is so different there. And in this model of tech and everything is like, success is what can you sell the most of. It's why trends come and go so quickly, regardless of, how much people may, need or enjoy them. And I that's something that I continuously encounter. One of the reasons I love in Moneyless Society is that everyone here is somebody who was like, why are we doing it this way? And it's like, because that's how it sounds. Like, that's not cool with me. That's not going to work for me. I need to know, like, if this is a good idea and a thing that's going to last and a thing that is going to help people. And I see it all the time in our chat spaces that like someone will say, hey, I can't do this thing. And you or Nathan R. or Dust is like, I have 5 things that actually I've found that work for that. I'm going to send you links, and you're going to be able to do these things you weren't able to do before. And that seems to be like the heart of like Technomancy for you guys, is like, how do we solve problems in easy ways that anyone can access? And I think that expands so far beyond like even just the way that we work and volunteer. Because, you know, when I first started, that was how I was thinking about it, how I was conceptualizing it. It was like, oh, like what platforms do we use? Where do we communicate? But it goes so far beyond that into like real world solutions. And I wonder, you know, if you, either you or both of you have thoughts on like how all of the advancements that we have now that are so limited by profit, like how do those things factor into a post-capitalist world? How is it possible to imagine a post-capitalist but technological world, you know? Sorry if that's a huge question. Whoever wants to bite into that.
Yeah, I
Great
mean,
conversation starter.
yeah, I want to kind of take a moment to plug that into what Lavra was saying about coming up with like the hard part of coming up with these alternative solutions is like one, we do end up using, you know, these profit-driven solutions. We are on Google Drive. We do use platforms and tools like this. We do use a part of that, and I think we do look towards creating alternative platforms and alternative solutions to that. We are building those things. That's something that is in the works through MAGNOVA and a couple of the other tools that we're building. And we are contributing to like open source projects and doing what we can to build that up. But the point that Lavra made is also really important. We're being forced to kind of transform the way that we use these tools differently from what a lot of other profit-driven industries might do, where it's really more about considering how do we make the ways we use this sociocratic? How do we make it so that the access controls and stuff like that aren't like, you know, this person has admin permission because of this and that, and everybody's restricted from using this kind of thing and stuff like that. Like, we want to try to make these things universally accessible so that it's not as much of a problem where somebody has to go get a computer science degree or be an IT manager to be able to jump in and get these things done. And if they don't know how to do something, they're not, you know, punished for that as a volunteer, because at the end of the day, it's our job to make these things accessible. And if there is a difficulty around using them, then it falls on us as a circle to make sure that we figure out solutions for that. And that's work that hasn't been done in the profit-driven spaces. It's something that is often ignored and is something that, you know, it's the real work that is limited by these, you know, like privacy driven, like you know, evil technology driven things.
Dark
like,
wizards.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call them wizards. Okay,
Right.
These are just finance bros. They're not wizards. Okay,
Yeah.
and they're the ones that are primarily driving these decisions. It is unfortunately the reality of it. It's like they have the money, they get to make the decisions on where the product goes, and their focus is not going to be something that doesn't make the money, which is making these things accessible to an audience that might not make the money, might not have the ability to contribute towards their causes, but very much need these technologies to be used.
Yeah, and also when you mentioned that we're using like these solutions from profit-driven entities, you know, something that crosses my mind is, yeah, there's like this danger inherent to being on a platform that is like motivated to, you know, make the money at the end of the day. But it's also worth recognizing that these like tech corporations, you know, they, like you said, they draw on a lot of brains, they draw on a lot of talent, and it's important to recognize. I think the work that some of the people do within these organizations to really shape how evil they are and, you know, fight against that. So with Google, like they very easily could have made everything, you know, just pay to enter. But there is no admission fee. You know, there were people that worked really and fought really hard, tooth and nail, I'm sure, to say, no, we have to have a commons, right? Like there can be this, you know, private sector stuff that we do. We can have, you know, our, you know, revenue makers, but there were people who said this has to be available to everyone for free. And that sentiment, I think that not to vote with our dollars, but to really like make ourselves and this need of ours known. I think there is value in like using the solutions that are like like the things that these for-profit companies are doing to build up the commons. I think that's important to recognize because they're kind of gods, right? Like, and if we use the framing of God as not just like, you know, a religious entity, but it's the best word we have to describe like this sort of fractal entity that is the collection of people and the way that they work. It is the logic that exists in that system, and it's made of people, so it is above them but also including them, and it influences people. There's this bidirectional information flow. People shape the whole, and the whole shapes the people. So it is not for nothing when we decide to like create a sort of a niche for them to do that. And I haven't really crystallized that idea yet, but it is really important, I think, that we acknowledge the commons that do exist because of corporations, not to like give them applause, but to say like it's very accessible. A lot of people know about it, and if we can look to that, if we can point to that and say, look, this is commons, that's what it looks like when you don't have enclosure, that's what it looks like when things are free and accessible, and how great it is. That is sending a message. It's educating people about the importance of commons. So Moneyless Society is really largely about building commons, and that's, I think, what we're getting at when we say we want things to be sociocratic and lateral. We want there to not be a paid ticket to enter. We want that to expand. So, we're also looking at the open source community. So we want to amplify and spread those ideas. Like NAN, for instance, we were talking about recently, is an automation platform that you can just install and use, right? So if you use make.com, then you get like, I don't know, a few operations per month. But if you use NAN, there's no limit, right? You have to host it. You have to like have your own server, either online or you can just put it on your own computer. And those solutions exist too. We aren't only living in a world where there are like big tech companies that have everything gated off. There's so much going on. There's a Cambrian explosion of indie developers, open source developers who are just doing it. They're just building the commons by putting it online and letting you copy the code. There's nothing that you can do to stop that. And so I think it's fascinating to witness a simultaneous enclosure by tech companies and this viral explosion of other solutions that completely nullify the reason to use these paid platforms. Because if you have like the ability to do everything that a paid platform can do, but for free, why are you going to use a paid platform? So, this drives them to increase their services and increase their value and all that. Okay, cool. Like, I guess that's capitalist competition, if you want to call it that. But at the end of the day, like, what we're doing is spreading awareness that you don't need that. Like, you can just have it for free. It's magic. There's no equivalent exchange necessary. You just have it and copy it infinitely.
Yeah, I think that's
money glitch.
The infinite money glitch.
Like I think the reason, like definitely we should give the companies like Google credit and stuff like that. They're founders in the space of what they're doing, and they do come up with like really innovative technological solutions on the regular, almost daily. And I just wish that we got to see more of that. And I know that, for example, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all of these companies support open source projects on the regular. And they are the reason that they have developers working on them full time, and they continue to be developed. And the reason that we have an open source ecosystem, because it does take time and it does take effort. Like MAGNOVA knows, Lavra knows themselves that MAGNOVA takes a lot of effort to put together as an open source project. And this is also another open source solution that we're trying to build and get and create and stuff like that. Like, another point is like, Google Drive wouldn't be as popular of a solution as it is unless it had that common space that people had access to, unless they gave people a certain amount of space to be able to experience all the features and the convenience that Google Drive brings. In the process of doing that, Google was able to force OneDrive to do that. It kind of forced Microsoft to compete in that space and create a commons themselves. They were kind of, and it's the same thing with Facebook, is like there are and have been in the past, social media and connection engines. But when Facebook made it open source and made it not open source, but made it free and accessible to everybody with an email, like a community email and stuff like that. Same thing with Gmail. Like you used to have to pay to have an email, but now Gmail has made all of that accessible and cleared up to the point to where you basically have to have a Gmail to be able to connect to an email provider, with the exception of Outlook and stuff like that. Because of the way that those protocols work, you have to be able to trust the system that the email comes from. So there is a lot to be said for this kind of gets into an interesting dichotomy of sometimes it's really really useful to centralize access to a specific tool or a specific platform, because if you have it distributed all across all over the place, you don't have a way of managing what of these distributions to trust. You don't have a way of doing that, and then sometimes when you run into limitations where if you just don't distribute it enough, it just completely collapses in on itself and it doesn't scale and it breaks, and that kind of gets into the more nitty gritty development kind of questions. But it interestingly also applies over to the social side of things. And that is kind of a reason why open source solutions end up being so valuable, is because they do have the ability to scale vertically, and you just get a bigger machine, you add more hard drives, you get more RAM, and you're able to make it so that more people have access to this piece of open source software. Or you can just have several instances spread out across different people's machine, and you make it accessible over the web to other people. That's kind of what we're experimenting with. This is, well, we say we, but Dust is really the person leading this. They have the knowledge in that space when it comes to containerization and administration and all of that stuff. And that's what they've been doing. They have this huge list, and you can look it up yourself on GitHub, called Awesome Self-Hosted, that just points to hundreds of different open source projects that are doing these things. And these are open source projects that sometimes have a community edition that is open source, and then a version of it that's enterprise that you need a license to be able to use. So they are able to kind of sustain themselves and be profitable, and make sure that if you are using the open source version, the free version, it should be because you're doing this for your personal use and you're making this accessible to yourself and a community. But if you are, an organization and you're making a ton of money, you need to be essentially held responsible and we need to make sure that you are essentially paying to make these projects continue to exist and things continue to happen.
Yeah.
I think there is a balance here where purchase solutions do have a place in the world. You can't necessarily, at least they have a place within the ecosystem currently, and we can't put those down because they are unfortunately the only way to really drive innovation sustainably, as long as everybody needs money to eat and live and to pay rent and to just have access to things right now. That's kind of a requirement at this point. So this is another thing that we talk about at a philosophical level within Technomancy, is what is the transition model? How do we kind of promote this kind of shared ecosystem while not really contradicting and going against all the different great works that already exist right now, but also not completely bowing down and saying we are absolutely obsessed with a specific provider and we're going to use them for everything, and because that's also a trap. The vendor lock-in is a real thing that even large scale companies have to deal with, and they end up getting stuck essentially feeding a corporation off the backs of their customers, sometimes customers that have no choice but to use them. It's unfortunate that there is kind of an opportunist situation that ends up being set up, and it feels necessary because how else do you sustain such a huge tech corporation?
That's so important to bring up, Jade. And you good catch partway through that, where you had to say no, that's not open source. And I think this is a great point to just say why open source is so important, why specifically open source is important. And it's because a lot of the time when you have these for-profit companies making a free version, what happens? They turn it into a paid version. There is no more free version.
Mm-hmm.
I experienced that early in my development career, which was still early in, but Heroku used to have a really, really generous free tier, and then people started abusing it, and I'm not using scare quotes to say that that didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
but you get these reasons, you get these various reasons that, well, we can't actually have a commons because human nature. And instead of trying to protect the commons, what they do is they quickly pivot their business strategy and use the mass buy-in that they got from people thinking this is going to be safe and then making it unsafe. Suddenly it's not. Suddenly it's not free. And people are still going to use your platform because it's hard to transition. So open source is a great solution to this, because once it's open source, you ain't going back, right? We don't have, at least, okay, I say that, and I should probably find wood to knock on, but hypothetically, I think one danger that we could like acknowledge is that, like, one day, what happens if, I don't know, the government decides that there actually can't be open source, or the internet is so regulated that there are paywalls somewhere or other. And there's always dangers, right? We don't live in this world forever. Things change, but when you also pair this, kind of realization with emerging technologies that people are already like psychically just realizing need to happen now, of distributed internet, grassroots internet. So there's like, native tribes, indigenous American tribes that are sponsoring the development of like internet infrastructure that just does not depend on the ISP consortium or whatever it's called, where if you want to be an internet service provider, you can. You just have to, like, if you want Facebook, if you want Google and all the stuff that's like hosted on the internet, with a capital I, then you have to pay an ISP to have your ISP connect to that internet. So there's this price of admission to this like main body of information. And in the future, what we might see is that changing a little bit. We might see enough solutions on these commons forms of the internet that we don't need that. So it's really important to like say, there is this coevolution of software and technology that accounts for possible scenarios. And that's one of the things that a lot of people they fall for the clickbait, a lot of the time. It's they see an article that says, oh, well, this is the way things are going to be. And they just kind of accept that because it's scary, and, they just need to know what to believe real fast. Otherwise, it's too much doubt and anxiety, and that's hard. Not being certain about things is hard for people. Yeah. But, open source, like hardware and software alike, are ways that we can evade that shutdown that might happen or might not. It's a way that, you can just be sure that you're going to be safe, right? If you have a machine that you can run your software on and it works without needing to connect to some paid ISP, without needing like some like shared infrastructure that's been monopolized and centralized, then you're a lot safer. So we're really focused on not just like free platforms like Google Drive or whatever, but ones that are committed to releasing their code for the public to view, that other people can contribute to and improve it. There's all kinds of reasons that we like open source, so that's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, I think a kind of a running thread that I'm hearing in what you're both saying is that, like, these technologies and these spaces, you hear the conversation about like electricity and internet becoming human rights in the same way that, like, you hope that food and shelter are, because that's the world that we live in now. It's like you need electricity to, control your home, and you need internet to be able to, interact with the world. And these concepts are being monopolized, so the way that we are aware of them is only like this monopolized form. And the idea that like, that these things are essential, and that they should be governed by people, the people who need them, and not like an individual profit-driven entity, kind of spans like the whole conversation of Moneyless Society. Like trying to pull back like food from industrial profit, trying to pull back housing, trying to pull back technology is another one. Like you need these things, and it's not in the way that like you won't die without internet, but but if you the commons, the social aspect of these things, like those are a necessary part of human society. And you were giving credit earlier to Google and everything for creating these commons, but I think that next step is like they shouldn't be owned by one entity or one individual. They have to be like, an actually productive human social space. And I think that that's probably it's probably hard for people to imagine what that would be like. We always think that like not having someone in control is anarchy, and that anarchy means fires in the street and people running around screaming. But the whole idea with anarchism and open source and these kinds of things is like, no, people know what they're doing to some extent. Like there are people who know how to do these things, and there are like ways to do them amongst ourselves that are more reliable. Like Lavra was saying, like you need to be able to rely on these things, them being there, and it not changing in a couple of years. And yeah, I hope that I hope that kind of comes home for people in terms of like how this ties into everything else, how technology and the technology that you access every day can be so different than just what we're used to it being. And I don't know if you guys want to speak a little bit on like you both have. I think I don't remember if you talked about MAGNOVA last time, Lavra, but you're both working on Harsoft together. You've been working on Village, things like that. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit on like to give people examples of the projects that you've been working on to try to accomplish these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had something to say, but this is a fun question, so I'll just skip to it.
Sorry.
No. It was. No, you're completely right. I totally agree. And so MAGNOVA, right? We have a video on our YouTube that it's always shocking, like when there's lots of views, because as an autistic person with like no social presence online, I'm like, I'm being seen. So it's always weird, but very fun. It's like, ooh, I'm giddy, but you can feel free to watch out for like a more in-depth guide. But the idea, as it ties in here, is how do we make the infrastructure for gift economy? How do we make the infrastructure for grassroots direct action that solves problems that people care about? So like the whole idea of what I was going to say, anarchism is so different than what people think of it as. And have just like as a side interlude, have you ever known a person who was sheltered for their whole childhood and went into the world not really knowing how to do things? Was that person you, perhaps? So we've seen this like overparenting from the state and from tech companies where we're infantilized as people and we're not given the opportunity to develop ourselves. So the philosophy behind anarchism that I would speak to, and that really resonates with me, I am an anarchist, with qualifications, right? Like I have a specific flavor of it, but the idea is that you build systems that are not authoritarian. You abolish hierarchy, where hierarchy is unjustified. So maybe like you have a sort of like structure of, okay, who knows what to do, like let's ask them what to do. But at the end of the day, like people are making decisions. That means that people are going to make better decisions over time. So when you have generations of people not being allowed to make decisions, you're going to have people who can't really make decisions. They're going to suck at it and act like idiots. So we don't want that future, right? We want a world where everyone's smart, or if they're not smart, like they're at least able to like have agency and autonomy. Like not everyone, intelligence is overrated. Honestly, being stupid or dumb is fine. Like if that's who you are,
it's more sensibility, right? Like than like intelligence.
Yeah, like but on the whole, like if society is not making smart decisions, that's a problem. So what the goal is with MAGNOVA is really drawing from that idea of like, how do we develop that decision-making capacity? How do we bring people into the political sphere? And how do we make action direct? How do we make direct democracy where like you vote with your feet? So the whole idea of like democracy is like the way to go is even like a loaded question, because when you get into like what democracy is, that's not necessarily what we're going for either, where you have like a majority rule. Veritasium, just bless them, released a wonderful video recently on why democracy is impossible, which, is little clickbaity, but also kind of true. And there have been, it's really fun to see that come up after like I've been like trying to tell people like, hey, these different voting methods actually fundamentally change the outcome. So like if you change the way you have elections, you'll change who gets voted for, and actually even beyond that, you'll change like what political parties come into power and how many there are. Like a two-party system, I think it's Diverger's law that guarantees that in a first past the post system, or maybe that might include other systems of voting, you have like a centralization of power, and then what that means is people can't vote for what they want; they vote for the lesser of two evils,
as we've seen.
Yeah. So on the, like MAGNOVA, like one of the philosophies behind like the way that that works is how do we like have people assemble their intelligence and then distribute that like in a way that actually solves problems without enforcing like the majority. So when you have like voting on MAGNOVA, it's for the connections between things. People are saying, yes, I agree that this issue causes that issue, or I agree that this project solves that issue, and that kind of voting isn't like it isn't a hierarchy or an authority. It's informational. So anarchism, and then the kind the flavor of it that we're going for is and not that MoSo is anarchist. That's not true either.
Right.
But the idea behind like a sociocratic mechanism is to bring that information together, make it accessible to people, and then facilitate the action that addresses something where you're getting consent from people that are affected, but you're not like you're also not just telling them what to do.
Yeah, that's huge. Absolutely. And I know, that episode about MAGNOVA is super insightful, and I definitely I'll link it in the description, but definitely recommend going back to listen to that. Jade?
Yeah, I definitely want to jump in a little bit on the kind of like distributed intelligence of MAGNOVA, and I want to maybe pitch the idea of open source intelligence. This is something that's used by like global intelligence gathering agencies because they basically came to the realization that like, you know what, you have information that we care about, but you need to keep it secret, and I have information that I care about that we need to keep it secret. But what if we created a space where like, you know what, maybe it's a good idea if everybody knew that this was going on, that everybody knew that this criminal organization is doing this thing in this area. Like the idea of open source intelligence is starting to take off at a global level because it really is just an inherently useful way of engaging with the idea of intelligence gathering. And then kind of beyond that, like, you talk about anarchism, and I do have like a deep love for anarchist philosophy, just because it's not the fires and we like graffiti everything and stuff like that. There's real philosophers and thinkers who have founded these ideas, and they're not based on the idea that everybody gets to do whatever they want. No, it's more about communities getting to manage themselves. There are versions of anarchism that are like that, like that you have like your individualist anarchists, then you have and like anarchist capitalists and stuff like that. And there's a lot of debate out there like about what anarchism really is, and it's very vague. So there's debate to be had around there. But to me, I like to follow the idea of social ecology, where you have many systems and you have many communities, and they all have different values and different ideas. And specifically, those communities exist in the real world. They're physical. They're at some level reach down from like, the ether, the digital ether, and they end up having to exist in the real world at some level. And those ideas end up manifesting themselves in the real world. So how do we kind of organize that so that everything kind of gets shared and distributed? And there are just so many ways of doing that. There are so many methods and practices and different tools, especially when you kind of merge this with the idea of technology. Like technology, from its very basic core, from the moment that we picked up two sticks and rubbed them together and created a fire, that's technology as well. Just a way of extending human capabilities beyond what might be considered natural or normal. It's about extending beyond that, and kind of, if you kind of look at the transhumanist definition of what technology is, that's what it really is. It's the ability of making humanity more than just like, this biological entity. Like clothing is technology that makes it that we can regulate our body temperatures better, but also it's technology that allows us to express ourselves. It's technology that allows us to learn about what a person might be just by looking at them. It all helps us control the optics of how we're social creatures. So there's a potential for a lot of different platforms to be created that kind of capitalizes on that makes that possible. And there are many non-technical people who have visions around how that might look like. So the thing with Harsoft is like we want to be community and platform builders. We want to make it accessible for everybody to get their vision created, for their platforms to be built. And to make it so that this happens in a way this can happen within the capitalist system, and make it so that people can dedicate full-time efforts to this. So there's kind of a profit motive where we do have to figure out a way to bring money into a circular economy that goes into these communities and stays in these communities. So we kind of have this system of like, you know what, we'll go and we'll do some Upwork jobs. We'll go out there, we'll make some connections with some people that have a profit driven incentive to actually build something that has a way of making money and charges people for certain things. And then we take that money and we take that talent pool that we've built around that and we bring it back into our system. This idea of a circular economy that can collaborate with the existing systems, but bring resources into it so it can continue to grow and continue to kind of become self-sustainable and self-solution. Because as these like visions and these platforms grow, like as MAGNOVA grows, we're going to have server costs, we're going to have hosting costs to worry about, and for it to really be effective, it has to be something that operates at scale. Like we do have Lavra, you do have a GIS system in there where it maps to every place in the world. Anybody can participate around the world on MAGNOVA, and that's because anybody can come up with a solution anywhere that can be helpful anywhere. Anybody can come up with a project idea anywhere. Anybody can see an issue anywhere that might be replicated in other different communities and stuff like that. So to build that global network to a certain extent, like maybe you can make it so that it's decentralized. You do kind of have to have a little bit of a monolith if we're ever going to figure out a way to connect that data together for everybody to be able to see it all at once. We don't like that. Maybe one day there will be technology that will make it possible, but we like, at least right now, we can't always just be concerned about the one day. You have to be concerned about 2 day, which is another thing to always be keeping in mind and to keep thinking about and keep doing.
Yeah, and I think, well, I actually forgot to talk about Hearthsoft and Village and all that, but yeah. So with Hearthsoft, I love how it is at the intersection of a lot of the things that Moneyless Society wants to do, while being a separate thing. Because yes, like Jade and I are both in it. It's a 2-person workers co-op right now, but like we're already talking with allying with other groups who would be able to do connect with us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, but are important to the sales process or important to connecting people with the resources they need. So part of what you're talking about, Jade, where we want to figure out how we exist in the today, is asking the questions of, and I've we've talked about this at nauseum, where I'm like, we have to have a workers cooperative. It's so important that we have workers cooperative because that is one of the biggest ways that I think we can coexist with the capitalist world, and also, be laying the foundation for a gift economy. Because, and also looking to social ecology and considering how a company affects their community. Because historically speaking, in the short history they've existed, workers cooperatives have just been more cognizant of their communities. If you look statistically, there's just more care when you have communities of people collectively making decisions. So there's something to having a protocol for people to work together that doesn't have hierarchy, or if it does, it's very limited, or it's limited to certain domains. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out that pattern of how to work together, how to do business in a capitalist world that is funneling money not just into the pockets of individuals, but into communities. And so that brings me to Village, which is focused on the idea of building community wealth, specifically for neurodivergent and disabled people, basically thinking about how can we make work for people that don't really fit in the traditional workspace, either because they're rejected, because their work is harder, because it's, they have to work to a neurotypical standard and it just doesn't fit with the way they think and the way they do. We have a lot of people in the world, I guess autistic people in general, are not happy with the way that we have to do things, because we are much more breadth oriented. We're thinking about the connections between things. We're really capturing a lot of what it means to be human. A lot of what people say is part of being human, but then completely ignore in their lived experience and just don't use in their life. It's like neurotypicals are stealing our credit for that and our morality and all that. so yeah, those are two things that we're working on. That I work as cooperatives, which we're still like. I mean, we're not business people. We're trying to learn the business elements and like get everything together, and we're trying to piggyback off Moneyless Society's work on bylaws so that we can, have really good ones that again like help us stay on track towards that future we want to live in.
Yeah, like absolutely. We do want to make sure that the way we work comes to change, and one of the only ways to really effectively do that is a workers' cooperative. Right now, the only way to really establish a workers' cooperative effectively in a legal sense is you have to go and you have to register your corporate. It's a corporation. You have to register a corporation in Colorado under a specific article, and the IRS considers that a corporation. So you're going to be taxed as a corporation. You're going to have to essentially figure out a way to, do corporate taxes, which usually means you have to go and you find a good CPA. You have to be very litigious when it comes to legal entities and the legal work around that. It's a really difficult process to really effectively establish yourself as a legal workers cooperative. There's a lot of ways to do it, and there's a lot of ways to participate in it. And it is something that we are putting in the effort to try to do it correctly and to make things, as sustainable as possible. And we do need support in that space. So if there's anybody out there listening to this that is empathetic to that cause, just let us know, because, I have ADHD. I have a bit of autism myself, and it's definitely difficult to sustain this. I do feel like I'm burning the candle at both ends almost every day, all day. I do work a really hard corporate job that is draining to me, where I'm not welcome, where I'm not appreciated, where I'm not respected, and it's something that I would hate to have anybody go through. And it's kind of one of the reasons that I am so passionate about building these spaces, because I want people to be able to sustain themselves and not have to rely on these systems to be able to survive, and to survive, not only survive but thrive. And I think that no matter who you are, or what you have access to, or what you're able to do, your perspective in and of itself as a unique individual human being is immensely valuable. It's irreplaceable. It's something that will never occur again. And it's not just your perspective as a whole throughout your whole entire life, but from that moment to moment, to second, each moment and each opinion that you have is extremely valuable and is part of the dialectic. We talk about the kind of referencing the social ecology again. Bookchin has a really wonderful book called The Philosophy of Social Ecology, and he talks about the dialectics of these different ideas merging together, not only with idea to idea and person to person and community to community, but also with the planet. The planet is constantly changing and constantly evolving, and we have to be ready to tackle that. And I think the only way to really do that effectively is to be able to know the people living, what the problems that people are seeing in specific ecosystems, because ecosystem loss is really a main problem here. Like the biodiversity loss is really a big problem here. And we need to be able to engage with multiple municipalities at a global scale to prevent things like desertification, to really implement grid systems that are resilient and self-sustaining and actually give people access to the electricity that they need. And the internet they need. We talk about these mesh networks and stuff like that. Those things are really expensive, and they require a lot of resources and a lot of technical talent, and we need them now. We need them as fast as possible. We need them a year ago. It's something that we can't get fast enough, and we have to figure out ways to engage with our communities and the world at large right now to prevent these ever escalating conflicts. It's a genuine concern, not just for me, but it's what I see in the fear and the eyes of many people that we're connecting with and talking with right now.
And that was exactly what I was thinking of earlier when I mentioned the whole like post-capitalist world thing. Like these are all realities that we're going to face. The technology supports these things, and like it's not just the political aspect of like money. It's like, how do we provide the things that help us survive in the world, and how do we like determine even how to do that? Like you were saying about preventing desertification, things like that. And I wanted to touch on something that you both mentioned that I think is really pervasive to Moneyless Society, which is the whole kind of like having a foot in both worlds. You're both trying to figure out ways that we can make the things you're creating successful alongside this like domination paradigm that we live in. How do you make open source successful when everything that doesn't make money dies? And it's the very same thing for, us spending our time here trying to volunteer and make enough money to buy food and things like that. A lot of people here are working full time or trying to, if you're not working a full time job, you're spending all your time trying to get resources or connections to survive. And then, coming here to try to build this alternative existence, this alternative paradigm. And I think that it's kind of, for a lot of people on the outside of the organization, it seems like this conflict of like, you're moneyless society, but you need money. And it's like, well, everything requires resources, like to build these things, we need the time to, like you said, to establish, yourself as an entity, you need the money or you need the connections. And so like everything that we do, every circle, every part of the organization is transitional. It's the figuring out how to build it. I almost think of it as like smuggling things out of the paradigm, where like you said about the circular system, you're bringing money into this system, not so that you can sit on it, but so that you can circulate it through this thing that you're building. We're bringing people that have talents. I love what you said, Jade, about how every single person's perspective is so valuable. We're bringing these people who, a lot of the skills that we've learned have been in this like hierarchical domination, horrible paradigm, but we're bringing that here and being like, well, I know how to make this. Is that helpful? It's like, yes, please bring that in here. You use that skill for good here. And, one of the things I wanted to make sure that we talked about was, people listening to this, I'm sure, there are going to be other kind of like tech heads out there. There's technomancers that don't know that they're technomancers yet, what kinds of things or what kinds of minds do you think would enjoy this space, working with technomancy, all of that? What do you think? Yeah. What kinds of minds do you think would enjoy it? And what kind of minds are you looking for in that circle?
I do want to, I think just really quickly, we don't need you to be a tech egghead to be a technomancer. We value everybody's perspective when it comes to tech because we don't want to be this technocratic, if you know how to code, if you know how to, do sysadmin stuff and stuff like that. That's not as important as making sure that this stuff is accessible. And we need people who have ideas about how tech should be used. If you hate technology, we still want you in the technomancy space because we want to understand why you hate technology. That's one of the things, like, in a sense, like, at some level, I do have a serious distrust of technology. And I think anybody who has a serious internal working of the way that many tools work today should have that distrust of the way that internet works. If you know a lot about cybersecurity and if you know a lot, it seems that the people that know the most about cybersecurity have the most, archaic means of managing their own personal technology. They don't use Google. They don't use traditional email servers. They don't use all of these different things, and they restrict themselves from all those things because they know how much and how invasive that those things can be and how unsafe that they can make you on the internet. So, if you are, I don't want people to think that if they're thinking about getting into the Technomancy Circle, or if they haven't already ran away from this discussion, that like they need to be somebody who is really obsessed with technology to be here. You don't need to be a futurist to be here. You really just need to be somebody who's interested in Moneyless society as a whole. Somebody who wants to see things move towards a better path on a community level, because there's no doubt a lot of skills that you have that are still very valuable to us. We need people who can design. We need people who can think about the way the processes should flow. We need people who can, get these, like, just message and communicate and build understanding around these different things and write documentation and manage boards in terms of tasks and stuff like that. There's so much to this that it's really difficult to sustain with like the 3 or 4 people that consistently show up to these spaces.
That brings me to raise a very separate criterion, which is being engaged.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of people who've come to the Technomancy Circle who are like, they have skill sets that are amazing, or they have a lot of good things to add. And one of the difficulties that we have is like people feel like, I don't know exactly why like people flit in and out, but it could just be because people who are like really at home on the internet are all ADHD and like going from one place to another. But like you laid the foundation for what I'm about to say really well, which is we don't need you to agree necessarily. Like, we just need you to be like able to sink your teeth in and engage with these tricky and very ambiguous conversations in a way that like it will start to take form. Because when you have enough people, like the thing that makes a distributed system work is having more people. So the way that you have more GPU, you get a better AI. Like that's just a fundamental truth about systems. When you have more entities in that system, complexity can begin to emerge and things can start to take form. So having people who are ready to engage in like the philosophical discussions about AI, for instance, that's hard. But I shouldn't say it's hard, but like a lot of people who disagree, I'll say my point, and then the conversation's over because people don't want to engage in that side of things. But we're not, like, at the end of the day, what we are isn't just a implementation circle. We're about like figuring out the what and the why. Like, is this actually a good way to go forward? And so, like, we have lots of very different opinions about what that looks like. But being able to exist in that space of ambiguity and challenging ideas, I think, is very, very important to being a technomancer. Even outside, like, if we're gonna like use it, coin a term, technomancer, then yeah, like it's being able to navigate ambiguity, being willing to go into the darkness of space and find something new.
I love that so much. I love the official technomancer definition. That's amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. I've been in a couple of the meetings with you all, and there is so much there's so much conversation and imagination there. I think that from the outside, because we're so used to the structure that we deal with in the workplace, we think that tech is just IT. Again, it's just like, oh, what should we use? But yeah, the conversations that you all have in those meetings are so they're so grand in scale, and it definitely pushes you to think about everything you interact with every day on such a different level. And then, yeah, just seeing things completely differently. So I have super appreciated that about any conversations I've had with you all. Oftentimes when we go to get on these calls, we'll talk for like half an hour about, like comets and AI and, things like that. And I think that's one of the coolest things about Moneyless Society in general, but Technomancy in specific. And, I think, unless there's anything else that you guys really wanted to hit on, the last thing go ahead, Noah.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I'll just add, like, that was really like theoretical and abstract. So I will say also that we are very interested in people who want to get stuff like automation set up. So for instance, I'm going to be learning Make for, some of the stuff I'm doing with the People's Agency, which is like, going to be leading into Harsoft's business. Like, it's going to be doing some like people connecting, sending people to free and paid resources, depending on their needs. And like the automate, I'm just learning it. So if we have wizards in automation, like the Moneyless Society's onboarding, for instance, could use a lot of help with like getting things streamlined. We do need some help with the implementation stuff because we're so theoretical. Yeah. So having people who are like, I don't want to get into that really deep conversation, but I would love to help do some menial labor. That would be incredibly important because we got a bunch of really high-minded individuals who don't necessarily follow through with all of our many plans. So you don't have to be a philosopher, but what you do need to be is amenable to philosophers being in the room,
tolerant of philosophy.
Yeah. And a couple of specific projects, just to kind of expand on that. There's also an open source project that Nathan R. is kind of leading and is the main contributor of and creator of. That's basically a custom web browser. It's an open source project, and we're getting to the point now to where we can basically put any runtime into a browser. There's going to be some technical talk here inevitably because these are some technical projects. And we also have, needs around, we want to do a website redesign. We want to do a roster database, which is kind of like a part of our new onboarding process and tracking which people are in what circles and how to contact them and when's the last time they've been on and kind of replacing a lot of these Excel spreadsheets that we've been using to manage to many different people and stuff like that. And also there's as far as like the open source space, we've been building something called the MoSo network, which is, everything under a bunch of these different domains that are hosting, open source tools, resume builders, Nextcloud instances, which is kind of a replacement for Google Drive, and we're trying to get that to work better. There are some issues around like resource management in there. And all this stuff is just happening on Docker. We're using Coolify to set up a couple of different web applications. We're using Git.ea, and these are all open source tools to kind of be an alternative GitHub. And there's a lot of different, code repositories and things that we're doing that we're trying to make open source more accessible and more usable to get to the point to where, if somebody is looking at having their own IT platform for their organization, maybe they can now look to open source more effectively, and they don't have to spend the time to stitch all these different things together. Like, we can really genuinely start to replace these different alternative platforms and kind of make something that's more tailored and more custom to each organization as we go.
That's so dope. Yeah, that's the other part of building the alternatives, right? Is like, wait, what else can you use that's not monopolized? And it's reliable because there's so many minds working on it, so many different expertises. Sure.
And you don't have to do this from inside of Moneyless Society. If you see something that we're doing, if you hear about a project that we're working on and you want to hop in and just be an open source contributor because you're a top-notch dev and you don't have much time, but you can do things that are cool and you kind of believe in these ideas too, just be an open source contributor. Find an open source project. If you need help finding an open source project, there's 100 we can recommend every minute. Just let us know and reach out, and we're always happy to have these conversations. We're professional yappers. So we're on a podcast for a reason. So just let us know and, comment, let us know. And we're very happy to engage.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that is another important thing, is that we recognize fully that not only is Moneyless Society small and new and not everywhere, but it's not the only group that is doing this kind of thing. It may not be the group for you. It may not be a way that you can consistently contribute. Like Lavra said, we've had volunteers come in who have spent a bunch of time with us for a little while and then departed, or are come back around every couple of months. But there really is there's no guardrail. There's just what are you interested in and capable of, and we do love when people stick around. That is helpful. But like Jade said, there's so many ways that you can share your knowledge or request knowledge. So please do reach out.
And we're trying to create an ecosystem too. So if you have your own projects, bring them in. That's what we really started out with. I had a website and I wanted to talk to other people who make their own websites, because maybe we can put them together, because this is all stuff that can manifest. This can emerge, but just bring yourself.
Yeah, come as you are. And what I wanted to close with today, we asked this on the last episode when it was me and Lavra and Nathan and Amanda about sort of what, because all of this kind of new series that we're starting here, which is going to run through the circles, but then start to get into individual members and projects and interests and things like that. They're all going to be people that are kind of in the Moneyless Society ecosystem already. And so I want to kind of start asking each person what they envision or want for the future of MoSo. So Jade, I want to put that question to you. It can be something abstract or something concrete, but just what you hope that MoSo can be or become or create as we grow.
I want and see MoSo already doing, being a collection of people who are focused on solving world problems in every domain, domains that are embodied by circles, media and messaging being its own domain, and circle, and people circle being its own domain, and having its own goals and stuff like that. And each one of these circles, alongside Technomancy and stuff like that, merging together and creating solutions to problems that aren't unique to MoSo, but are unique to the world at large. And then we try to provide those as templates to be implemented and to solve problems at potentially and hopefully a global scale. Because we need to be getting to the point where we can no longer be childish about these problems exist and it's this person's fault and it's that person's fault and it's this country's fault and it's this country's fault. And we need to be focused on being what, there's a problem, let's find a solution and let's get it solved, and stop being childish about this person gets to contribute and this person doesn't, and really come together and focus on getting these problems out of the way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anything huge like that, but just embodying, creating, being as part of participating in Moneyless Society. I personally have become a person who's there's an obstacle in the way of that person. I'm going to remove that obstacle because I can, and because I can, I should. So becoming a better person through Moneyless Society, through participating in Moneyless Society, and not necessarily a better person, but a person who is, more focused on being a problem solver instead of a complainer, a problem creator, becoming a person who's more of a thinker and more of a philosopher leader than, and I guess coordinator. We don't like using leader at Moneyless Society, but
Right.
somebody who kind of embodies the idea of using thought to solve problems instead of just thinking about yourself and being obsessed with the ego and your own personal everyday needs and stuff like that. That is part of it, but like we need to start thinking about each other and our communities more. That's something that Moneyless Society is already doing and continuing to expand and helping other people and potentially one day other organizations do.
Yeah, I want to say I see that both in both of you so much, the problem solving instinct. Like that is just it's funny because we don't have like leaders per se, but Lavra mentioned this earlier that like you want to have people who know, and you're both people who know, and I love that that your instinct almost this is a detriment sometimes to all of us. We're like, I can help, I don't have time, but I can help, and it's like, but you know that you have something that can help, and I see that in both of you so much, and in so many people in MoSo. So I just want to say that I appreciate both of you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. I hope that is the direction that more of everything, more of our organization goes in. I thank you guys so much for sharing the insights today, telling us about Technomancy. Was there anything that you wanted to kind of close with, Lavra? I don't know if there's any final thoughts that you had as well before we sign off.
No.
Valid. Awesome.
Sometimes it's all you need to say.
It's true. Yeah, I would say look out for more episodes like this. We plan to release these bi-weekly, and we're going to go through the rest of the circles. We still have media and messaging, admin, people, direct action. There's still a lot to learn. So stick around, comment, ask questions, reach out, and we hope to see you somewhere in the ecosystem in the commons. Appreciate you guys.
It's been a pleasure, everybody.
Do you want to do something about all the issues we talk about here on our show? Do you want to learn more, get involved, and help us help others break out of the cycle? Step 1 is to join the growing community of rebels and kind hearts sharing their knowledge and passion. Follow Moneyless Society on our social media pages and spread the message to people who need it. When you're ready, you can get involved by reaching out and becoming a Moneyless Society volunteer. We need every skill imaginable, large or small, if we're going to resist the powers destroying our planet. And even if you don't have time to volunteer, you can help us build the dream with donations of any size. We create all of this community and content because it is our passion, but we need resources to get it done. Monthly Patreon donors receive cool perks like early access to future episodes, and visitors to our website, moneylesssociety.com, can buy MoSo shirts and other merchandise that help spread awareness. We're glad you're here, and we hope that you'll keep learning and growing with us. The goal may seem far away, but we can get there together.